So I want to get into the offensive line. The much maligned Miami Dolphins offensive line throughout, I don't know, it seems like it's been 20 years of our Dolphins fandom. Certainly over the last, I would say, decade, it's been a bugaboo. Certainly in the Chris Greer era. And here's the thing. The Dolphins offensive line got a lot of credit for taking a big step this year. And I think that was well deserved when it came to running the football. The Dolphins finishing as the number 3 rush offense in the league and putting up some really gaudy rushing totals, particularly early in the season. And, they also were, I think, statistically ended up being the number 1 offense in the league from a yards per game perspective. And, Tua was sacked very few times. So people said, well, the offensive line did a pretty good job. But as you got towards the end of the season and you played really good defenses down the stretch and you look deeper into the numbers, what you see is that, one, when it came to the passing offense, the Dolphins, the reason why Tua was sacked so few times is because they made a concerted effort to get the ball out of his hands in a record time of less than 2.5 seconds per drop back. But he was also, while he had, arguably one of the fewest pressure rates of any quarterback in the league, the time that it took opposing defenses to get that pressure was extremely high, which points again to the fact that this is not a great pass protecting offensive line. And further, this was an offense that struggled to run the ball down the stretch against better defenses. And so many people have said, coming out of the way this season fell apart, that the offensive line is still primarily what is wrong with the offense. Now, I'm of the belief, and I've always been of this belief, and I've said, if you've listened to this show for years, you've probably heard me say this at least half a dozen times. There are 2 ways to have a truly elite offense in the NFL. One way is to have an elite quarterback, and another way is to have an elite offensive line. At times, it may have appeared that the Dolphins had an elite quarterback. At this point, I can safely say, and I think most of us can safely say, the Dolphins do not have an elite quarterback. Tua, no matter what you feel about him, you may feel like he's a very good quarterback. You may feel like he's a pretty good quarterback. You may think that he's an average quarterback. Hell, you might even be one of those people that thinks that Tua sucks. At the end of the day, the one thing that I don't think anybody's going to argue is that Tua is not an elite quarterback that is going to carry this team regardless of what his offensive line does. And I think this year is the proof of that. That what we did was we proved that Tua can play at a very high level when protected, but with this offensive line's limitations, there's a certain ceiling of what Tua can do. So you better beef up that offensive line to, 1, have a better running game that you can lean on down the stretch, and 2, have an offensive line that can protect for more than 2.5 seconds so that when you play the best defenses in the league and they make you hold on to the ball for more than 2.5 seconds, it's not a complete disaster like it was coming down the stretch this season, particularly in that game against Kansas City.